Welcome back to my little channel. Today I'm going to respond to a BBC article. That's not really a response. No, you're right. Well, actually it is a response, but it's a response to a written piece. This piece is about how the world is responsible for what happens in Aleppo. Apparently, people in Srebrenica were a little bit upset about the fact that shit is going down in Syria at the moment. Because, well, the world said it would never happen again, right? And don't get me wrong, I think what's happening in Aleppo is terrible and we should try to make it go away. Not go away as in we don't hear about it, but go away as in it shouldn't happen. But it's happening not only in Syria, in Aleppo, but it's also happening in Yemen. Nobody talks about it. It's also happening in Sudan. Nobody talks about it. It's also happening in the Ukraine. Nobody talks about it. Are we being basically goaded into something? And shame on you, world. I mean, this looks like a nice little Muslim woman. Not being derogatory, not being negative. So which is the world she's talking about? The Western world? The Muslim world? Well, know this. If this is being done in Srebrenica, they're not talking about the Muslim world. Now you could claim that I'm assuming she means the Western world and not the Muslim world. And you know what? You'd be right. But why am I assuming that? And in this little piece you see why they blame the white people. And I'm not going to say that the UN did a good job in Serbia, because it simply didn't. But there were people there trying to do something. It was woefully inept and inadequate, and all governments concerned have already said that they were wrong in this. But if we are going to compare what happened in Serbia to what's happening in Syria, shouldn't we then look at the local world around Syria? Because the local world around Serbia came to help Serbia. They failed at it, but fair enough, they were there. How many Muslim countries are in Syria at the moment? Now, one could argue that I'm not being completely honest, because there have been local countries that allow Syria refugees to come to their doorstep. Syria has refugees in Iraq, Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, and Turkey. Well, and there are lots of refugees in Europe apparently, though it's only a small fraction. There's only about 1 million of them, and there are in total 4 million outside of Syria, it seems. You may, however, have noticed how certain countries are not on that list. Countries like Saudi Arabia, which is by far the largest country in the area, it seems. And they are part of the UN, but nobody is calling them out. No, we're complaining about Russia, and we're not looking any further than that. But people in Srebrenica are not happy about what's being done in Syria. They'll recognize that the situation isn't completely the same, but the funny thing is the next bit. Rebels opposed to President Bashar al-Assad have held the eastern part of Aleppo since 2012. So basically what you're telling me is that a part of the civil war insurgents is in Aleppo. These are warriors. These are not civilians. But a major government offensive backed by Russian air power has squeezed them back into an area of 2.5 square kilometers. I'm sorry, how is this the same than civilians in Srebrenica being killed by Bosnian insurgents? Because you're now complaining about the fact that a group of rebels is being pushed back, but they are the insurgents. These are not peace-loving civilians. And yes, there are civilians in trouble in these areas, but they are so because of these rebellious forces. And we've already seen in many a news report out there that even the government opposed rebellious forces that have support from America or United Kingdom or European countries are heinous acting bodies. I mean, we've seen footage of children being beheaded by these rebels because they did not agree with them. So how is this the same as what's happening in Srebrenica, and why is the UN, or why is the world responsible for this? Though I do understand that the people in Srebrenica feel aligned with the people in Aleppo, the civilians in Aleppo, because they were once victims too. I find it funny that I don't hear anyone talk about the civilians in the Ukraine that are suffering from a civil war. But it gets worse still. This is what Hassan says in Srebrenica. We felt like being abandoned and not belonging to this humanity, he says. Not being treated like a human. We keep repeating never again, but when it comes to action, we don't do anything to prevent those things from happening. And you know what? I understand you a little bit. But why is this happening in Syria? Most of the warring factions are warring with each other because they feel the other person is the wrong sort of Muslim. But we don't mention that. Why not? And then we complain about Russia helping the Syrian government to fight back a civil war. But that civil war is against Muslim, well, you would say Muslim extremists, I would say Muslim factions. We don't mention this. Why not? The thing is, I'm not really sure why the BBC thought it was a good idea to make part of this story be about the atrocities that happened in Srebrenica. Because no one is denying that these atrocities happened in Srebrenica. Are they now saying, well, this is what we didn't prevent, therefore we're bad? We know that these atrocities are happening in Syria too. And where in Srebrenica it was done by the Bosnian Serbs, in Syria it's not. But it's too easy to say, well, look at what Assad is doing. Look at what Russia is doing. Why can't we look at what the rebels are doing? Why can't we look at what ISIS is doing? There's a reason it's a civil war. And I don't like the fact that it's a civil war, but Assad is the legal ruler of Syria, whether I agree with him or not. But this article is virtue signaling the highest level. I mean, they're hoping for someone to help, but their hope has been in vain. How is Aleppo the same as what happened in Bosnia Serbia? There was a civil war going on there as well, don't get me wrong. But in Aleppo, we have fighting forces standing and fighting against each other. Where in Bosnia, people were just rounded up. That's not the same thing. And then the end part. Aleppo is the end of the notion that the international community stands for values. My suffering has been completely in vain. Bosnia got butchered, Bosnia got raped. Oh yeah, no, it's about Bosnia that Aleppo has a problem now. But Aleppo is not at the end of the notion that the international community doesn't care. Russia is helping Assad. Therefore, Russia cares for at least part of the problem. But we're complaining because Russia isn't helping the ones we want to help. But the rebels that we are supporting are rebels still, and they are killing innocent civilians too. But we're not to mention that. Guys, what happened in Bosnia Serbia was terrible. What's happening in Aleppo is terrible. But they're not the same thing. And this is where their piece ends. Look at Aleppo and Syria and tell me what's the difference. Nothing. Well, there is a huge difference. We are now also engaged in Syria and we are opposing Assad and Russia is helping Assad and we're trying to make it about that. People complaining about how Russia is helping Assad because, oh, look at the rebellion. Oh, those rebellious people are so nice. Let's forget for a fraction of time that rebellious people are groups like ISIS. No, let's not mention that. And let's forget for the time being that Aleppo has been taken over by rebels. So Syria isn't fighting its civilian, or in a way it is, but those civilians have taken up arms against Assad. He has the right to enforce the law in his own country, and Russia is helping him with that. I'm not happy about it, but I understand where they're coming from. And to say that they're not allowed to, that's really weird. And this wasn't the case in Srebrenica. Yugoslavia had fallen apart. The factions were fighting with each other to become independent states. Is Aleppo trying to become an independent state? No, they're trying to stay Syria, but Syria without Assad. There is another way to try and achieve that. This is not the best way. I'm not surprised. I have no illusions. It's Aleppo today. It may very well be Idlib tomorrow. I have no idea what Idlib is, but okay. You know, the thing is, you're right. There may be another civil war somewhere else tomorrow. And the worst part is that we are not equipped to deal with it as long as we keep talking about, well, some people are allowed to do this and some people are not allowed to do this. The worst part is that part of why America and the European Union isn't cracking down on what's going on in Syria is because, yeah, but the Muslims. Well, wait a second, these are Muslim factions fighting each other. And Russia doesn't care. They're just helping Assad. And Assad is a Muslim too. But he is the elected president, or, well, the lawful president of Syria, whether we like it or not. Now, I might be oversensitive and claiming that they are trying to get white people to help the situation in Syria. But then again, I have a reason why I feel this way, and that reason is because people are pushing the UN as a responsible party. No one is talking about how Turkey could do more, how Syria could do more, how Saudi Arabia could do more. No one actually mentions the fact that Saudi Arabia is engaged in a war, but they're engaged in Yemen. Who cares about Yemen? No, Syria is a problem. How are we this lopsided? How did we come to get these double standards? Well, I have an idea, but I'm not sure if you want to hear it.
You're fucking a white male! So? You're a white man!
Yeah, I know I am, but I'm not quite sure how this is part of the argument. But then again, in a way it is. Because we, as a white people, we kind of blame ourselves for everything that goes wrong in the world, no matter what we do, no matter if we're part of it or if we're not. For example, this whole Syria thing, we are blaming ourselves for not being part of it. But if we would start bombing the shit out of Syria, then don't worry, in a couple of years people will start complaining about how we bombed the shit out of Syria. And that's because of the regressive left. Because of the social justice warriors. You cannot do right by these people. And unfortunately, the people complaining about how we fucked up in Srebrenica, yes, you are right. I'm completely agreeing with you. But don't you then also understand why we cannot do right in Aleppo? Because there are warring factions and we cannot agree with all of these warring factions. All we can say is stop fighting. And we've been saying that, but they stop listening to us. Or at least they've never started to listen to us because they keep fighting. How come we don't recognize that? Us being white people doesn't make us the rulers of this world. And when we act like we want to bring safety and peace, we get complained about that we basically don't listen to the local people. And when we fail, it's our fault. But when we do nothing, it's our fault. These are three situations wherein we can do no good. And therein lies the problem. We need to stop the narrative. Because yes, the people in Syria need our help. And yes, Russia is delivering on that help. But we're not happy about the way they do it. Well, fuck that. Something needs to be done. And we can't complain, or we can't keep complaining about how white people need to save the fucking world, while at the same time being told that they're the root of all evil. Something's got to give. And at this point in time, white communities are retreating from the world. The Western community is taking less and less responsibility on itself to save the rest of the world. And you know what? I understand that. I'm not happy about it, but I understand it. So what can we as a world do to stop make this about race, to stop make this about religion? It's a cultural thing. It really is. And Western culture wants to help other people. But at the same time, Western culture attacks Western culture for not doing enough. We can't have this, people. And this virtue signaling, this blaming, has got to stop somewhere. Anyway, this video is also stopping about now. Let me know what you think. Criticism, as always, is more than welcome. Like, share, subscribe if you feel so inclined. And I will see you all next time.